of that particular statistic was something you could defend.
The other thing that bared out in the analysis was that
The machines told us we were right.
the machines told us we were right, which was nice. I for one welcome our machine overlords when they come.
I figure we better make use of it now, because with with some of the stuff that we've been able to figure out with AI, I figure I have about 9 weeks left on this job.
Yeah. I feel like Claude and GPT and the deep research stuff.
Come
like,
Memorial Day, I'm out of work.
Yeah, I know it's kind of crazy, but
there's going to be an avatar sitting here talking to you. All right, so now we're recording.
What did we learn? And if you say that you're the funnier one, I'm going to freak out.
Well, I don't have to say it.
That's unbelievable.
It's kind of
I can't believe we spent 20 minutes with the mic, and that was you.
Well, first of all, as I said, I'm the talent, not tech support.
Unbelievable.
So
Now that we've gotten the mics figured out.
Now we got the mics figured out.
Unbelievable. So
we're off and running.
We are off and running. And as you said to your daughter the other day, Riley, we have tens and tens of followers now.
We do have tens and tens of followers.
Tens and tens of followers. Yeah. It's really great.
She was actually astonished. She's like, "Dad, are you on a podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah, check it out. I'm on Spotify."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh my gosh!" And she was listening, and I go, "I got tens and tens of followers."
How did she take it?
Pretty typical. She was like, "Oh my god."
Yeah. You yahoos have to deal with this now.
Yeah, so I'm delving into that world.
Well, we'll save more Riley stories for later. Shout out, Rye.
What's up, Rye?
I think. But listen, that first podcast went really well. I was very pleased. I was pleasantly surprised.
I thought
we got good feedback. Either people are lying to us and just trying to be nice, or we did okay,
or really, really bored.
Or really bored. Could be one of those two.
That's tens and tens of people out there.
Tens and tens of people. So with today, I think we wanted to. Well, our first podcast, we were talking a lot about statistics, and we wanted to kind of dive into some different aspects with the real estate podcast, and talk a little bit more about our thoughts on flight to quality.
Yeah, I think. Hey, we're always trying to be. We're always trying to look at our particular slice of the real estate world in a different way, and bring some different reflections. It starts having an understanding of the market, having an understanding of the statistics, which we dove into last time. And I think this time, we can talk a little bit about some of the thoughts we have about what to do with those stats.
Yeah.
And how to look at them. Maybe a little bit differently.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good way to put it. And I think that, it's something that isn't unique to the Philadelphia market, not unique to Eastern PA, Jersey. I mean, we see this in other pockets around the country.
No, I think what we're going to jump into here, and it is this flight to quality concept.
Yeah.
It's pervasive. It's every market.
Yeah.
And the statistics that we look at are played out across every market in the country. And when we kind of dive into this a little bit further here, I think we have some statistics here locally that really kind of crystallize that story.
Yeah, locally and some statistics nationally. I think that when we saw them, were really pretty eye popping.
Yeah,
from the standpoint of national flight to quality trends. And I think that maybe one of the first things that we should do, and I'll turn this over to you because you're an educator of sorts. Let's just give a refresh on our thoughts on how we're classifying Class A versus maybe non-institutional class, second generation.
Sure. Yeah.
B
well, I think
buildings.
it's important for this discussion to understand how we're comparing one building / asset to another, and why one falls in one group and one falls in another. So when we talk about flight to quality, what we're talking about is an occupier that's in currently what we would consider a second generation Class B, B minus C asset, however that asset is viewed, versus our data set. And our data set, what we track, our team, is institutional type of product. So that's institutional in nature, in building design and construction.
Mm-hmm.
So, tilt up, precast, what have you. Over 200,000 feet in actual footprint, And then the last part of that is on the clear height, 28 feet clear or higher.
Yeah.
So that's our data set from which we start. And then buildings, facilities that fall outside of those parameters is what we would consider a candidate for a flight to quality, and would be an occupier that would be in that grouping, that if we saw them move to one of those other Class A buildings, as we've described it, we would consider them a flight to quality tenant or occupier.
And it's funny. I started thinking about this the other day, and just in general flight to quality, and it took me back to Park 31 with Brian Bentrott when he had it under contract, and the fact that we at that point in time, when we were meeting with
shout out
Mr. Brian Bentrott, when we were meeting with potential sources of equity, when we were meeting with debt, we couldn't even give a Class A set. We were calling buildings Class A for the market.
We had to define it that way. So, when we look at our statistics today and we talk about Greater Philadelphia, and again, for those that maybe are outside of this market, Greater Philadelphia, the way we define that is Philadelphia County itself, so the city of Philadelphia, and then the kind of the ring counties, excluding South Jersey and the other side of the river, just for Greater Philly. But it's Bucks, Montgomery, Chester, Delaware, and then into Newcastle County. That's how we define Greater Philadelphia. But in today's set, we're tracking called 35, 36 million square feet of Class A institutional type of product. But you go back to when we were underwriting, we were attempting to underwrite, there was nothing.
Nothing. It was. It's really pretty remarkable, and it's remarkable the speed at which that product ultimately delivered to market. And we'll touch on kind of how that impacts a little bit of the statistical analysis that we look at. But what you did see when we were marketing that project and working with Brian was it was actually astounding, the meetings that we were able to get with local occupiers who. You called them and said, hey, we're marketing this brand new project. We're going to deliver buildings that are 36-foot clear, ESFR sprinkler systems. You're going to have trailer storage, ample parking, LED lighting, and
all the modern amenities.
And people would say, like, okay, yeah, come meet with me about this. We were getting numerous proposals for buildings. We didn't even have entitled land yet. It was really, and
we were just talking about the concept of delivering that type of
concept.
Building. And occupiers that were living in 18-foot clear, 20-foot clear, shallow truck courts, no speed bays, any of those current expected deliveries with the Class A product, it just wasn't existing.
No.
In fact, what we realized was the only Class A in our data set that was existing was really built-to-suits.
Yeah.
That's it.
And then that was something where we really looked at that. I mean, you saw Airgas, true built-to-suit.
Yep.
You had Turn 14, true built-to-suit. They were out in the market looking forever.
Years
before they built that. Allmac, little different, but certainly a true built-to-suit from that nature, more office, but a North American headquarters. There was nothing for them to look at. Honor Foods, Tasty Cake. Yeah. I mean, you could go on and on and on. And then also, I think what we also saw was, if you looked regionally, a lot of deals landed in South Jersey, in the Logan area, that
because there was no product.
There was nothing in Delaware County. There was nothing in Philadelphia. Not anything new. And so, it's really pretty. It's pretty remarkable just how the quality of buildings and just has really morphed into what people are delivering and how people are now looking at these buildings from a quality standpoint and how important it is from a functionality standpoint.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And it what it does is as we look at our market today, and a lot of this, what we're talking about, this flight to quality, and what we did this really deep dive was really related to, again, how we talked. How do you underwrite these projects?
Yeah.
You talk about your tenants in the market, who's here, who's likely to land, and then if they're going to land, what kind of building are they looking for? And when we started this journey on the Class A side, on the spec institutional, hey, if there was a tenant in the market that was looking for those parameters, it was not available.
Yeah.
So we started to take a step back and we said, okay, so in today's market, and we touched on this last time with our stats, but when you really kind of unpack that, hey, what's, if our market here, 15% is Class A when it was zero for the most part, and we had to kind of classify things as Class A for the market.
Yep.
So that construction standard was different. The ceiling heights were different, but it was a Class A building for the market.
Yeah. And I think that the big takeaway for, in our additional research is this is not a localized trend, right? This is a national
No, this is not
trend.
limited to Philadelphia.
And I think, and I'm just so I don't mess it up because, this is an important statistic and I want to get it right. Buildings built between 2020 and 2024 saw net positive absorption of 378 million square feet. Now, hey, that in its own right, I mean, listen, it was COVID. There was a tremendous increase in demand. Everybody was rushing to build buildings. I mean, that in itself it's an eye-popping stat, but at the same time, it's somewhat expected, right? What I was kind of floored by is that those buildings built before 2000 saw a net negative absorption of 139 million square feet.
Yeah,
I mean that's just crazy to me. So you truly had this migration that the statistics bear out between buildings that were older, less functional buildings into more modern, institutional type, for today, Class A buildings. And
I think one of the things that goes along with that is the occupiers that fled to the quality construction. They represent a who's who of corporate America. These are not localized companies that you question their credit or whatever it may be. This is the type of tenant you would love to have looking at your building and occupying your building, because from a credit profile, it's who you want.
Yeah,
and they were representative of many of the flight to quality examples that we'll touch on.
Yep, and I think that this is a really important concept that we want to drive home, because I think we're seeing some of the statistical analysis here, the vacancy rates, right, being used against industrial developers, and kind of trying to use it as anti-warehouse sentiment, right? Oh, we've got a lot of buildings that are vacant, right? You don't need more industrial buildings to be built. Well, because the statistics don't necessarily tell the true story. Because when you look at these from an apples to apples perspective, a like kind perspective, the Class A buildings within this market in particular, and talking New Jersey and Pennsylvania, are a smaller data set. It's a small stock industrial market. I can't tell you how many times I've had to have that comment and give that explanation before, right? The vacancy rates are not indicative of the strength of the market. And just like the vacancy rate for product built before 2000 is not indicative of the market, it's a much larger pool of buildings. So you look at a 3.5% vacancy rate, which is where those buildings sat, kind of pre-2000 construction in mid-2024, and you compare that to maybe a high single digits, maybe even in some cases greater Philadelphia, low double digits, teens vacancy, it's not telling the full story. And people are using that, oh, well, there's a bunch of buildings sitting vacant. It's not as if these things all get built and then all of a sudden immediately leased. There's a lifetime to these things. Everybody underwrites downtime. It's just the natural progression. The big thing is that clients and tenants are clearly showing a progression and a migration from older vintage assets to buildings that are more institutional in nature for today's market. They have better clear height, they have better column spacing, they have deeper truck courts, trailer storage,
think about
etc.
Think about some of the tours and discussions that we have on an ongoing basis. It's just kind of a regular thing. How important are the actual floor specs?
Yeah,
I mean, some of the second generation buildings, the B minus C assets, they're just non-starters. For some of these operations. Because just something as basic as the floors. If the floors aren't perfectly flat to a certain threshold, it's a non-starter. You can't occupy that building. Because your ME will not operate in that.
Well, and it's becoming more and more apparent that quality is king, right? Especially for these groups opening up new kind of enterprise DCs in different locations, right? They're looking for quality buildings. And it's not that the other buildings that are older vintage are not good buildings.
No.
They're still good buildings. I
Still
said it
great
last
tenants
time.
in 'em.
I'll say
Still
it again.
Great occupiers in them.
We would love to own those buildings. We
love
don't,
to own 'em.
unfortunately. But those are...
If we own a bunch of those buildings, we'd be doing this podcast from a beach somewhere.
Yeah, that would be kind of nice. That would be awesome. But what it is it's kind of created almost a tale of kind of two markets, right? It's created two distinct markets within a market. You have a Class A market, a brand new building market.
And one market feeds the other. It doesn't go in reverse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. And so I think that it's just understanding and then properly positioning when you're looking at it from the landlord perspective, and then also from a tenant perspective, understand like, hey, if I'm gonna locate into a Class A building, I'm gonna be paying up. The efficiencies are going to have to outweigh. I'm going to need a reason to be in that building.
Yeah, well, if you look at those efficiencies, hey, there's obviously nuance and math that goes into each of these. But if you're in 300,000 feet in a building that's got 16-foot clear, and you can invest in racking and other material handling equipment, and you can reduce your footprint from 300,000 feet to 180.
Yeah.
That math pencils.
Yep, that maths.
Yeah, that maths.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I think we've talked a lot about what flight to quality is, right? We've highlighted, our thoughts on it and just kind of how it's played out in this market. Shared a little bit about how it's playing out nationally.
Let's talk a little about how we took a deep dive into
how we used it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So credit where credit's due. I know I don't do this often. It was your idea.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Play
your
that
idea.
on a loop.
I know. I don't want to play it on a loop. I don't need that. Head's big
That's a
enough as it is.
soundbite I need.
You're already referring to yourself as the talent. That's all I need.
Wow.
So
It's a given.
why don't you walk our tens and tens of listeners through what we did on the analysis for the Thames?
Yeah, so what we tried to get our arms around was how do you quantify not just the flight to quality candidates, because that part was relatively straightforward, because you look at the building asset itself and you say it either falls on this side of the ledger or that side of the ledger. So that part was relatively straightforward. What we wanted to do was to try and get smart about who were the most likely occupiers in those buildings that did not already exist in a Class A building. Who's most likely to move?
Yep.
And then of those, who's most likely to move? Can you quantify it? Can you rate it?
Yep.
And really start to be predictive of it.
Yeah.
And the way that we did that was we set out on what ultimately was a pretty heavy lift.
Yeah.
Investment of time and resources, but we studied each individual building.
Yeah.
And of course, we didn't study, every building. It wasn't, the 15,000 foot, unit or something like that. But it was
every bulk building.
Every bulk building. And we studied them under a handful of criteria. Those criteria were what kind of critical infrastructure do you have? Are you rail served? Do you have a lot of HVAC equipment? Do you have some type of permit there that would allow you to have some kind of process that you would have to re-achieve somewhere else? We looked at the proximity to certain locations. Is that critical in your particular business? Then we also looked at we invested in some software that allowed us to study some other things like labor, for instance.
Yeah.
And we looked at each individual occupier's labor and where that labor was coming from.
Yep.
So were they actually captive to that particular location? Was all the labor coming from 15 minutes away? Was it coming from 25 minutes away? Was it coming from 50 minutes away?
Yep.
And the higher time that labor would be from outside their really tight geography, we gave that a rating, and we rated all of these based on those different criteria.
Yep. And I think that one of the, and just the analysis itself really gave us some pretty interesting insight as to, I mean, do you take the labor perspective, for example? And I think this is kind of interesting for us. It's pretty universal that people use a 25-minute drive shed when they study labor. I mean, that's what we see when we go on tours. It's what we do. I mean, we use a 25-minute drive shed.
Hey, we're not saying that that's wrong.
And we're not saying
it's
that's
a great
wrong.
starting
I mean,
point.
it's
a
actually
point.
what you probably is the industry standard and what you should kind of hang your hat on. Now that changes market to market. I'm talking our markets, right? I'm talking where we kind of stomp our ground on the day to day. It's probably talk to Ward and James and those guys and Cole, and they probably say like, "Hey man, 25 minutes, like it's Texas. That's not enough time."
I do that to go to a Circle K.
Yeah, exactly. So with that in mind, though, what we did see is that for a lot of occupiers, we were pulling labor from distances that were 35 to 50 minutes.
It was
close.
Unanticipated.
It was not anticipated. It was a surprise for us.
When we would look at I'll use an example, a building in Salem County.
Yeah. Well, case in point, Amazon.
Yeah, we thought, hey, all this labor is going to be coming from Wilmington. It's right there.
Yeah.
And we found out that we were flatly wrong about that.
All of that labor was coming from Camden. It was coming from Pennsville. It wasn't crossing the bridge. And that's something for us. We had countless times said, "Oh, you're Wilmington. Look at how dense that heat map is from a labor perspective. It's going to come across. It's going to service." But that's just not what we saw from where that labor was ultimately coming from.
We were able to demonstrate that in an empirical way. It is really kind of undeniable.
And then I think one of the interesting aspects that, because, hey, I think it should be, we should tell everybody and kind of be clear. We set out on this analysis, and our ultimate goal was to score occupiers, right? We wanted to score.
Yeah, we should take a step back there.
Yeah.
So of the, what we studied, almost 1,000 occupiers?
1,200, it's a lot.
So our intent was to, again, become predictive on who was most likely to move.
Yeah.
And again, we had those two categories. We also studied and ranked by landlord, by when the lease was struck, and by some other criteria. And then we weighted all those criteria. I think we ended up having seven different criteria.
Yeah.
And then we ranked and weighted each criteria, which then we put into a formula, and it spit out for us a ranking, what we call a TEMS ranking, so a tenant evaluation matrix ranking.
Yeah.
And we did that from 0 to 10.
Yeah.
And what we found was, as you moved closer to that 10, your likelihood of moving was predictive.
Yeah.
And we were able to actually start to predict. And we went and back-checked that with what we saw as flight to quality tenants that had actually executed deals.
Well, and that for me is when, we did this, we went through this process, and we kind of set out, and we were like, hey, this is a lot of work, kind of see where this goes, and hopefully it bears some fruit. And then we went back and we were like, okay, well, let's spot check some deals that we would have considered flight to quality. DHL, PGW, VHO, absolutely would have been a flight to quality. Aramco in New Jersey. You had J&J Snack Food. That was flight to quality deal. And Gillamy, flight to quality, right? And we went through, and then we went back and looked at the buildings that they had been coming out of.
Right.
And we noted and saw, like, wow, okay, so these groups were ranked 8 and higher, 9 and higher. Then we went
on our scale of
1 to 10. Then went back and looked at, hey, who are those groups that were out in the market that did renewals, that went through renewal exercises, right? Some of them ours. And we saw that those rankings actually were kind of in that 4 to 6 range, right? And so we were like, wow.
It kind of became a coin flip. Are they going to leave? Are they not going to
leave? Or they're not?
Yeah.
And so what it's allowed us to do is to be more predictive on how we do this. Now, I will say one of the most interesting things that we did was we put this into some AI.
Yeah.
Right. And we looked at that from an AI perspective, and we said, all right, so AI, take a look at this data and tell us if there are any correlations that we're not drawing.
Yeah.
Because
what do
of
you,
this.
yeah, Mr. AI, what are you seeing that
What
we're
are you
not?
What are you seeing that we're not? And now this will probably, we don't want to dive too far into this. We can certainly talk offline with anybody that wants to talk about it. But the combinations of, hey, this is a manufacturer in a B building, there's a propensity for them to stay or leave, versus a third-party logistics operator in a C building and a propensity for them to stay or leave. There's some real quantifiable metrics that you can say to a landlord or to a tenant, right, that you're representing, and say, hey, listen, for what it's worth, if I was the guy working for the landlord, I would say that there's no way you're moving. It is what it is. And that's just something you're going to have to deal with. And you have to be out there, and you have to be willing to maybe move. You have to be out in the market, do that exercise, and really show it, because based on our criteria, it doesn't look like you're going to leave the building.
Doesn't look like you're going to leave, and I think what when you're in that process, you need to truly be, if you're on the tenant side, you have to be truly willing to move.
Yeah.
Because there's statistics and study that we can kind of point to and sort of rate whether or not you are.
Yeah. Well, and I think also too, I want to talk about a little bit about how we've used this on the underwriting aspect.
Yeah, I think that's a really relevant piece that we were able to sort of augment our underwriting.
Yeah, because everybody talks about TIMs, tenants in the market. TIMs. Give me your TIMs. Who's out there, who's looking at buildings. And I mean, we do these reports. Everybody expects them, and we keep a TIMs list. But to be very,
it's important.
It's
important.
important.
You have to have the TIMs.
You have to. But to be very fair, you get an inquiry that goes on your TIMs report. You get an inquiry for a third on behalf of a 3PL. That could be one of 3 3PLs.
Yeah.
You just don't know. It's hard to quantify. And so
I think, hey, I know we all do this as brokers in our different, our different shops. We try and distill that information as best we can.
Yep.
So you're giving as clean a list as you can, and you try and understand, hey, this is the geography. It's tight to the Lehigh Valley. It's tight to Central PA. Really wants to be in Northeast PA, and you try and get that to where is this? Is this a true regional search? And where all of that, where all of that data kind of boils down and distills, you try and make that as clean a list as you can.
Yeah.
But even with that being a really clean list, I mean, how many TIMs actually land? What's the percentage?
Yeah.
It's a low number.
It's a low number.
Yeah.
It's a really low number. And I think that by using TIMs, you're able to say, hey, we've got a project. We're able to look at a drive shed.
Right. The TIMs, not the TIMs.
Not the TIMs. You're able to look at a drive shed, and you're able to say, okay, within this drive shed, based on our investigation and our analytics, there's a certain square footage that is here, captive, that is available, that is a flight to quality target.
Right. So what you can do is you have the kind of the different buckets. You have, hey, anybody that's going to underwrite is going to say, okay, who are my potential tenants for this potential building? You have your givens, which everybody, anybody in brokerage can say, like, hey, X, Y, and Z. These are going to be companies that are going to look.
Yep.
And it's everybody knows them. And then you have your TIMs, and so those are the deals that are active in the market. And then what we said was, hey, there's a lot of meaningful activity that's coming from tenants and occupiers that are already here. So you don't have to prove to them the geography and the value of being in that particular submarket or whatever it is. They already know that.
They're underrepresented in your data set.
Yeah, they are underrepresented in your data set. You have to account for them.
Yeah.
Because what we see, and we can point to it, we can say of the deals that get done, many of them, a big percentage, are represented by the flight to quality tenant.
Yep.
That occupies the new building that was previously unavailable to them.
Yeah.
And you have to quantify, you have to put that into your underwriting.
And I think that's a really good segue into talking about, hey, I just said it before, you just said, hey, that flight to quality tenant, quality is king. What developers, landlords, capital are doing now as far as it relates to building design and the importance of building design post-COVID. I think you and I joke, and we said this to others on tours, right? Like, hey, what's this building been challenged by? Why hasn't it maybe leased as fast as somebody would have anticipated it to lease? And he said, well, it's a 2021 site plan.
That's a COVID design.
It's COVID design. It's the build it, get it up, because you can do no wrong.
Yeah.
It will
lease.
It will lease. It will lease at a rental rate that you arguably could say is 25-30% higher. You will have multiple parties vying for that opportunity.
And people were not wrong.
People were not wrong. People were, people were very right. At the same time, once the COVID push and kind of boom for space started to fall back, and you started having more buildings to look at, the building design, access to the building, the functionality of it, especially when you could all of a sudden, and I remember when we did it, when we were doing a renewal in Jersey, you and I got in the car and we were like, oh my gosh, we get to go see 6 buildings today. I mean, we haven't had an opportunity to do that in 5 years. This is remarkable.
Right.
And so building design became critical.
Yeah, actually, the occupier themselves got to dial into the nuance of the actual building design.
Yep.
And compare design and all the other aspects of the actual property to the others.
Yeah.
And previously, that was not something that you could do.
And I will tell you that capital now, it's not just the tenants, it's not the developers, it's the capital sources.
They're laser focused on.
They're laser focused. It is something critical. You're looking at a building, it's like, hey, okay, I have to design this so that I can demise the space. I have to park it the right way. It's got to have the proper loading. I mean, hey, we've got one site. This was one for me. It's like, hey, I'm going to sacrifice some yield here so that my grade for the truck route is 5% or lower. Right. I mean, those were things that you look back and
things like a loop road. You look at a plan like, well, where's the loop road?
Yeah, exactly.
No, we don't need that here. Like,
okay. Yeah, sure. And you look at that 2021, nobody was asking those questions.
No.
The fundamentals were thrown out the window.
No. How quickly can I get the money out the door and get into production?
And I think that also...
that was the market.
It was the market, right? And I think that what this has meant for... All right, so what's this mean for landlords? What's this mean for buyers and sellers, right? And this is an important context. We're always trying to, again, utilize what we're seeing and try to take away pieces of information that are of benefit and that can be utilized and understood by our clients today or hopeful clients at some point in the future. So I think that the biggest impact that this had was yield of site design, right? Because what you had during the COVID run-up, during that period of time, was a race for max yield and max dollars. So you sacrificed certain things. You sacrificed the loop road so that you could get an extra bay. You sacrificed having trailer storage along the entirety of your dock high door set because you wanted to push it a little further, even though there were some wetlands that prevented it. And now you can only have trailer storage on half your truck court.
Has drops opposite the dock packages.
Exactly. And so what we have seen, and one of the things that I thought was really interesting was you've seen now people have to right size these site plans. And what that has in the past meant is, hey, you lose square footage, you are losing dollars, right? But we wanted to take it a little bit, again, using AI. I for one welcome our machine overlords when they come. I figure
we better make use of it now because with some of the stuff that we've been able to figure out with AI, I figure I have about 9 weeks left on this job.
Yeah.
So.
It's not a long run for us.
We have to make some money. I got college to pay for, and then I would like to at least take a beach vacation every now and then.
Yeah, I'm the true save for the rainy day. Like I feel like Claude and GPT and the deep research stuff.
Come
like,
Memorial Day, I'm out of work.
Yeah, I know it's kind of crazy, but
there's going to be an avatar sitting here talking to you.
So what we did was
He'll be talented.
It would be a talented avatar. We took all of our lease comps And then we analyzed them for a few things. We analyzed proximity to highways. We analyzed building design. Now, that was subjective to our, kind of thought processes and how we ranked certain building design. We looked at it from building class. We looked at occupiers, and essentially we analyzed this using Claude. And some of the findings that we came back with were really pretty interesting. And I think that one of the things that's something worth sharing for people, because I think it's meaningful for sellers, it's meaningful for buyers to be able to convey. Those buildings that were well designed, that were within a mile of an interchange, commanded almost a 20% premium in rent.
Right.
Versus
it was meaningful.
It was a meaningful difference.
A number that was quantifiable,
Yep.
and you could demonstrate that the arrival of that particular statistic was something you could defend.
Yeah. Now, this is something that we always thought to be true, but it was something that bared out in the analysis. The other thing that bared out in the analysis was that
the machines told us we were right.
The machines told us we were right, which was nice. Again, I welcome our machine overlords when they come. The other thing that we saw was that as you progressed away from the interchange, a major interchange, there was a quantifiable discount in rental rate for every mile that you left that major interchange, which, not like, oh, hey, it's kind of going down. It's like, no, for every mile you are away from an interchange, the data set that we analyzed said it's a 22 cent reduction in rental rate.
Yeah. Now, I think it should also say that the other fundamentals of the development itself have to be there.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
You have to have labor. You have to have access. You have to have all those other boxes checked.
Yep.
But when you again peel all the other parts of it away, and you get to a point where okay, I'm going to compare this particular part of the design and location versus others, then you get into something that's quantifiable.
Well, and I think that's a really good point. We also asked AI to take a look and say, hey, what percentage of the rental rate can we kind of rely on and say, hey, this is highway proximity? And it did say that it was higher than all the others, right? But it also did keep in mind, and it kind of shared with us that the building quality paired with proximity was what was really the fundamental driver in obtaining a premium rental rate.
Right. Those two coupled together were sort of undeniable.
Yeah, it was a significant synergy between the two. And so how does that impact sellers, right? How does that impact buyers? I think that what we think is hey, yes, you're going to lose some yield. If a developer comes and says to you, and hey, most landowners at this point that are still have their land, right, have seen offers, and they've seen maxed out plans, and they've seen big numbers. And if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I think that I can build 350,000 square feet here, and somebody says, well, I saw a plan for 400, you should get a premium for the 350.
Right. Yeah.
There should be a premium on the buildable foot that you can get on that 350, because that design means a better rental rate.
It means a better rental rate, and here's the other thing too: if that's a stabilized asset and it's a merchant builder, they are going to see a better cap rate. On the trade. Yeah.
Now, at the same time, and will be one of the big things we want to make sure that we convey here is, don't with what we're saying. It doesn't mean that land prices have gone back to what we were seeing in 2021 and 2022.
No, that's
not happening. I mean, we should be really clear on that. When we say a premium, we mean that somebody can pay a little bit more than a market price today, and those market prices have changed significantly. And based on our own poll that we conducted recently, so Mike and I sent out a poll to many of our kind of friendly clients, and we asked them some of their thoughts on sentiment for buyers today. And some of the feedback we got back was really interesting. And one of the biggest, kind of pain points right now for developers and buyers was seller expectations post-COVID. Just not having a real understanding of where the market is today.
Yeah, I think what's happened, and obviously this is a case-by-case thing, but when you had sellers who were under contract or reviewing offers in that time period, and hey, Fed started doing what the Fed started doing.
Yep.
It changed that math dramatically. The math was no longer mathing.
Yeah.
We saw a dramatic drop in land values, and that vaporized a lot of deals.
Yep.
And the issue became that many land sellers, whether individuals or whether corporations, they had an expectation of where that land might trade, and that's gone.
Yeah.
And it's not coming back. So I think for a time there, it was just like any kind of change in a market, that seller, that person that sat on the other side of the table would say, like, well, why would I engage now? I'm just going to wait for the numbers to come back up.
Yeah.
And enough time has passed where it's kind of a realization, and they've seen the math themselves and had it explained to them enough where they can understand that, okay, I understand what happened, understand why that transaction didn't happen at that valuation. I'm sort of ready to re-engage.
Yeah. As we've said with our clients many times, people that we talk to, this is an unemotional math problem. It is math. It is rental rates. It is cost of construction. It is cost of site work. It is what you can sell it for ultimately. There's no real emotion in it, as emotional as this business can be. Yeah. So we're not quite getting the hook, but I'm going to tell you right now, my computer's at 2%. So I'm going to give ourselves the hook, or you're going to be talking to yourself here in a minute. Yeah.
Talk to your avatar.
Now, so I want to throw this out there. You don't know I'm going to do this. I want to do a March Madness pick'em pool with you this year.
Ooh, I'm down.
Yeah, and I will.
I view that as the greatest sports event in the world.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. It is the greatest sports event in the world. Now, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is. I will bet you a plate of Kavanaugh's wings that I will score higher than you on the March Madness pool.
Extra crispy with extra sauce?
Extra crispy, extra sauce on the side, extra blue cheese. Yes. Like I didn't know that order, like kind of was coming.
And my fill of Allagash?
Your fill of Allagash whites. Yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. Okay, I'm down.
All right, awesome. Yeah. All right, you heard it here first, folks.
Okay, and I'm going to tell you one other thing, and this is a little surprise for you. As a show of gratitude to Liz and the marketing team, in our next podcast, I will be bringing in one of Mikey G's famous recipes.
Oh, there we go.
And I'm going to start out strong. I'm coming with my oven-baked barbecue chicken.
Oh, look at that. Liz is over there clapping. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a crowd pleaser.
Now we hear the claps. Yeah. There you go. Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
And then what I'm going to do, if it is well received, in the next podcast, I will walk through the preparation process.
Ah, okay.
All the way from my homemade barbecue sauce to how to put it in the oven, take away certain levels of like the chicken grease.
Yep.
And when to turn it on 450 to singe the outside.
1% battery left. I'm going to bring homemade cornbread, cast iron.
Ooh,
there we go.
Strong.
Cornbread and barbecue, and then a really nice afternoon nap. All right. Well, hey,
Liz, we're on it.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate our tens and tens of listeners, and hopefully we move it on up.
15th.
Yeah. Thanks so much, and we'll be back at you soon.